Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens when the boss turns his back? Between silent hallways and weary looks, some stories never reach the boardroom, unless someone decides to listen with their heart. And that's exactly what this CEO did. He took off his suit, donned his frontline uniform, and walked anonymously into his own business. The intention was simple: to understand why the smiles have disappeared, why customers are complaining, and why so many employees are leaving. But what he heard in that supermarket from the mouth of a young cashier in tears was much more than a management problem. It was a silent cry for dignity. This is a true, moving Brazilian story about transformation, courage, and the power of seeing others. If you think leadership is just about numbers and goals, you might need to hear what this employee had to say. Because after that, nothing was the same again. Eduardo Mota, president of the supermarket chain New Generation, was restless. Managing more than 180 stores across Brazil, he began to notice what many would overlook. The mood among employees was sour, and customer complaints were multiplying like termites in ancient wood. That's when he made a bold decision. He took off his expensive suit jacket, put his gold badge in the drawer, and became Marcelo Dias, an ordinary unemployed man newly arrived in Belo Horizonte. Unshaven and carrying a worn backpack, he entered as a newcomer to one of the chain's oldest stores, known for its high staff turnover and a tense atmosphere behind the scenes. It was the perfect place to see what the reports didn't reveal. Upon arriving, he felt the weight of discouragement in the air. The parking lot was nearly empty, and the once vibrant store looked grey. He noticed cashiers operating alone, a slippery floor, and a manager pacing back and forth with a frown. Eduardo, now Marcelo, understood. The problem here was deeper than any spreadsheet could have predicted. On his first day, Marcelo was assigned to help with the cash register. That's when he met Késia Nogueira, a young woman with a tired look and a hesitant smile. What caught his attention most, however, were his red eyes, not from allergies or sleep, but from someone crying, trying to hide it. It was the kind of pain that screams even when silent. During the break, sitting in the back of the store near a shelf of expired products, Késia opened up. She explained that she was a single mother and that her young daughter, who had severe asthma, required constant care. But with no support network and a tight salary, she could barely stop for a second, not even to breathe a sigh of relief. Marcelo listened without interrupting. And the more he listened, the more he understood that the store's problem wasn't just turnover or poor performance. It was overworked people trying to hold their own without recognition, without support. And Késia was just one of the many faces behind these inhuman statistics. It was a muggy Tuesday, the kind where the heat seems to melt even your patience. Késia was waiting on a line of impatient customers when she received a call. The voice on the other end was distressed. Her daughter had a high fever and had been taken to the emergency room. Her world stopped there, amidst the barcode scanning and the cashier's beeping. Her heart racing, she ran to the manager, asking to leave early. The response was as cold as an air conditioner on high. "I can't do it today. There are only 2 operators on shift. If you leave, it'll disorganize everything." Késia felt herself being confronted by a cruel dilemma. Either continue handling bags or rush to the hospital to hug her sick daughter. Marcelo, observing everything closely, felt a lump in his throat. It wasn't just an operational decision. It was the kind of moment that exposed, without retouching, the moral bankruptcy of a system that prioritizes productivity over lives. There, he began to understand that the company's crisis had a name, a CPF, and an urgency that the numbers ignored. By late afternoon, the store resembled a battlefield. Lines built up, the system crashed, and customers huffed with impatience. That's when a man, holding bottles and looking grim, refused to show his ID to buy alcohol. Késia, following protocol, calmly explained that she needed to check his ID. The customer refused to talk. He began yelling, accusing her of being abusive, and threatened to file a formal complaint. The entire store stopped to watch the spectacle. The manager, instead of supporting Kezia, preferred to avoid any trouble. He asked her to release the sale, contrary to company rules, and even gave her a disapproving look that cut like a knife. Marcelo couldn't take it anymore. He intervened discreetly, trying to diffuse the situation, but was ignored by his superior. What he saw there was more than mismanagement. It was the normalization of abuse, the silencing of ethics in the name of quick profit. And ultimately, Kezia once again was defeated by a system that chooses to please the client, even at the expense of the dignity of its employees. The next day, still shaken, Kezia was called in for a talk with the manager, Claudio Santana. The room was small, stuffy, and windowless, the typical place where truths are spoken in hushed tones, but hurt loudly. His tone was dry, almost impersonal, and the content even worse. She was disrupting the store's operations with her dramas. Marcelo overheard part of the hallway conversation and felt his stomach churn. That speech wasn't about productivity, it was about crushing feelings, as if human beings were machines programmed to not feel. Claudio didn't care about his sick daughter or the stress of his aggressive client. He wanted goals, period. It became increasingly clear. The problem wasn't just Claudio. It was an entire machine spinning its wheels, pressuring managers to demand more and more, with no room for empathy or humanity. Marcelo realized that if he wanted to transform the company's culture, he would need to look much deeper at the roots of the system. Kezia returned to the cash register as if returning from a wake. Her eyes were puffy, her posture hunched, and she looked as if she were carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Marcelo, with a lump in his throat, approached discreetly and said the only thing he could at that moment. "It wasn't your fault." And for a moment she nearly broke down right there. As she mechanically scanned the products, she revealed that she'd been through worse situations, including losing another job because she rushed out of work to take her daughter to the hospital. In her boss's eyes, she was a problem. In real life, she was a woman trying to survive with dignity. A detail no one in the HR spreadsheets could see. Marcelo felt a sudden realization sink in. The problem wasn't just an insensitive manager or a disorganized store. It was a corporate mentality that treated people like numbers and ignored the essence of those who wear the uniform every day. There, amidst barcode beeps and forced smiles, was an urgent truth begging to be heard. The next morning, the atmosphere was already tense when a man in a light-colored dress shirt and official badge entered the store. "I'm Adriano Werneck from Internal Audit. I'm here to review your alcohol sales procedures," he said calmly but firmly. The team froze. The manager paled. "And Kezia?" he gasped. As Adriano walked through the supermarket, noting expiration dates and sanitation, he turned his gaze to the cashiers. He pointed to Kezia's station and asked to review the previous day's beverage sales records. She immediately paled, remembering the scene with the aggressive customer and the order to release the undocumented sale. The tension was palpable. Employees whispered, Claudio broke out in a cold sweat, and Kezia trembled, trying to maintain her composure. Marcelo watched everything closely. He knew this visit could change the course of history, but he also knew the unfair system might try to shift the blame onto those least deserving. The wheel was starting to turn, and there was no stopping it. Manager Claudio tried to maintain his composure, but his expression betrayed panic. When Inspector Adriano mentioned possible irregularities in the sale of undocumented alcohol, he looked away and blurted out the classic time-waster line, "We'll investigate internally." But the inspector was blunt. "This needs to be reported to the regional office." Upon hearing this, Kezia nearly dropped the scanner. She knew that if she were held responsible, she risked losing her job, and worse, losing her daughter's health insurance. Marcelo, steadfast, decided to intervene. He requested a private conversation with Adriano and calmly explained what had happened, including the manager's direct order to violate procedure. It was at this moment that Marcelo's role as an incognito employee took on new importance. He was no longer just observing, he was advocating, taking risks, and speaking out for those who no one usually listened to. And there, in that back room, justice began, timidly, to move from paper to practice. Marcelo knew that simply reporting the facts wouldn't be enough. In corrupt systems, the truth requires proof, and he had it. The day before, anticipating the outcome, he discreetly recorded the conversation between Claudio and Cassia, where the manager threatened to fire her for causing problems with his personal dramas. Now it was time to show what lay beneath the surface. During the next conversation with Auditor Adriano, Marcelo placed his cell phone on the table, pressed play, and the room fell silent. Claudio's words, harsh and insensitive, echoed like gunshots inside the room. The auditor raised his eyebrows. Claudio, standing in the doorway, paled when he heard his own voice saying, "Do you want to choose between working here or taking care of your daughter, Cassia?" Adriano thanked him for the material and said it changed the entire context of the investigation. Marcelo realized that this was a decisive moment, not just for Cassia, but for all the employees at that store. He was challenging the company's culture, exposing the kind of leadership that hurts more than it motivates. And this was just the beginning. Back at company headquarters, Eduardo, now reverting to his real name and title, called a meeting with the directors. Sitting at the head of a long table and surrounded by well-dressed executives, he dropped the bombshell bluntly. "If we continue to ignore what's happening at the grassroots, we won't have a company in 5 years." The silence that followed spoke louder than 1,000 spreadsheets. With a firm tone, he exposed everything: the drop in morale in the stores, the abusive practices of some managers, the unrealistic goals, and the lack of human support. He showed data, reports, and even the recorded audio. He proposed urgent changes, among them a 20% salary increase for operational roles and an emotional support package. Some directors frowned, others whispered about unsustainable costs. But Eduardo didn't back down. He said he'd seen the other side of the coin, that he'd heard the pain on the shop floor and seen where the system was failing. "Either we change the way we treat people, or we'll continue to lose top talent and customers along with them." The meeting, which began with resistance, ended with the seed of change being planted. In the following weeks, Eduardo didn't just talk, he acted. He began personally visiting the chain's locations. New generation, introducing a new code of conduct and company values. In every store, he repeated a simple but powerful phrase: "They are people, not numbers." And every employee who heard this felt something shift within them. One of the first measures was to fire manager Claudio and review all leadership contracts at stores with high turnover rates. Eduardo also created the Ethics in Service Pact, a commitment between leaders and employees to ensure mutual respect, humane goals, and active listening, something almost unheard of in the industry. Additionally, it launched an internal program called Transform People, focused on employee well-being, with psychologists, mentoring and training courses. The most skeptical turned up their noses, but those who knew the pain of the rank and file up close, like Cassia, understood. It was the beginning of a silent revolution, but with a tangible impact, and there was no turning back. In a live broadcast to all stores nationwide, Eduardo spoke directly to employees. No teleprompter, no rehearsal, just from the heart. He announced the company's new phase, focusing on dignity, respect, and human appreciation. He said, looking into the camera, that those on the front lines would no longer be invisible. The impact was immediate. Veteran Donna Celina, who has worked at the Campina's store for 22 years, cried in front of the screen. When asked if that was true for her too, Eduardo replied, "Especially for you." And he went further. He announced a loyalty bonus for someone who had been at the company for more than 10 years and promised that the culture of fear and abusive charges would be a thing of the past. Another symbolic gesture was the creation of anonymous active listening line, where any employee can report abuse, without fear of retaliation. The change went from theory to practice. It was no longer just about saving a brand. It was about saving the soul of a company that for a time had forgotten where it came from, the trust of those who wear the uniform every day. Eduardo began to see the presidency not as a throne, but as a platform for others to climb. He realized that leadership isn't about having all the answers, but rather asking the right questions and listening. His store visits became routine. No advance announcements, no fanfare. He wanted to see reality as it was, without spreadsheet-based makeup. During one of these meetings, an employee said to him, "President, this is the first time someone important has listened to me." That hit home. It was the kind of compliment no marketing campaign can buy. For him, the focus shifted completely. Value for all involved, not just for investors. And yes, he knew this change would be costly in the short term. Some regional leaders resisted. They questioned the new expenses, the breaks for emotional rest, the ethics training. But Eduardo was firm. Caring for people isn't a cost, it's an investment. And so, even with some of the board gnashing their teeth, he remained steadfast in his mission to rebuild a company where everyone could truly be proud to belong. Eduardo knew that fine words don't fill shopping carts or renew supplier contracts. So he was clear with his advice. He gave himself a one-year deadline to prove that humanized management can be as, or more, profitable than the old way. If it doesn't work, I'll hand in my badge. The statement caused a stir in the room, but time began to show its strength. 3 months later, store turnover dropped 28%. Social media, which had previously served as a channel for complaints, began to display customer praise for the service. And the most curious thing, employees themselves began defending the company in online groups and forums spontaneously. The press also noticed. Business magazines and HR portals began highlighting the new generation as a case study in ethical transformation. And Eduardo, far from boasting, simply said, "We're just doing what should have been done from the beginning." The change was real, tangible, and, most importantly, visible to those who mattered most, the people. A year after that journey, disguised as an employee, Eduardo presented the company's new figures. Revenue grew, net profit increased, but curiously, it was the drop in resignations which drew applause from the board. Because now, people no longer wanted to leave the new generation. They wanted to grow within it. During the presentation, he projected images of smiling employees, customer testimonials, and even a handwritten letter from a cleaning employee. "Today I feel like I'm part of something. Before it was just a badge." This moved even the most skeptical. For the first time, success was being measured, not only for the cash flow, but for the company's human climate. Eduardo concluded by saying that the new generation's greatest asset was not its capital, its stores, or its stock market shares. It was committed, valued, listened to people. Because at the end of the day, that's what sustains any business that wants to last. True relationships, not just commercial transactions. The new generation's transformation wasn't just about speeches and numbers, it also impacted real life. Agnalda, a warehouse operator for over a decade, moved everyone when she shared that, thanks to the company's new health plan, she was finally able to have the eye surgery she'd been putting off for years. "Now I see everything, even what the company has become," she said, smiling. Another case was that of Renato, a night stalker who had been renting for 8 years. With a salary increase and a new bonus for collective performance, he was able to make a down payment on his own home. He not only signed the lease, but also made a point of inviting his store colleagues to join him in the move. "This house is the result of our teamwork," he said emotionally. And Kesia, with her stability, she was able to enroll her daughter in a specialized school and began studying at night to finish high school. When Eduardo met her again, she said, "The new policy didn't just save my job, it saved my hope." She was living proof that when a company transforms from the inside out, it transforms lives entirely. With his house in order, Eduardo turned his eyes to the horizon. In a meeting with his board members, he declared that Nova Geração was ready to grow, but not like before. This time, we're going to expand consciously. I don't want to just open stores outside Brazil. I want to take our approach to human resource management abroad too. The proposal surprised, but also excited. He created an organizational culture committee that would guide him through each new store opening. The idea was simple: no expansion without purpose. Every new unit should be founded on the pillars of human value, active listening, and ethics. No repeating past mistakes, even if it means slower growth. At the end of the meeting, a board member asked, "What if it doesn't work out there?" Eduardo calmly replied, "Then we'll come back, but we'll never go back to the way things were before." And so, amidst strategic maps and feasibility charts, it became clear that the company was no longer just looking for a market. It was looking to make history, with values, with truth, with soul. A year after that courageous transformation, recognition arrived, and not just in the form of awards. Nova Geração was named the best retail employer in Brazil, beating out giants that previously dominated the rankings. But for Eduardo, the true victory came in the form of something much simpler: seeing one employee hugging another at the end of a long day. At the CEO of the Year Award ceremony, he took the stage with the calm of someone who knows he's done the right thing, not the easy thing. Instead of fanciful speeches, he told the story of Kessia, her daughter, and the choice she made to trade her position for companionship. He said that being a leader today means having the courage to feel, and he concluded with a quote that moved the audience: "No profit is worth more than a respected life." As the photographer's flashes went off, Eduardo smiled discreetly. He knew the work was far from over. But he also knew that from that moment on, a new chapter had begun, not only for the company, but for everyone who believes it's possible to do things differently, and, over time, to do them better. What about you? Have you ever stopped to think about how many stories of overcoming, injustice, or transformation are happening right before your eyes, without anyone noticing? Perhaps with that quiet colleague at work, or that employee who never misses a show, even when facing storms outside of work. The truth is, we all carry invisible battles. The difference lies in who chooses to see them. This story shows that leadership is not about authority, but about responsibility to real people. It shows that changing the system starts with small actions: listening more, judging less, and having the courage to do the right thing even when it's hard. So, the question remains: which culture are you contributing to in your daily life? The one that oppresses, or the one that transforms? If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And of course, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to continue following content that inspires, provokes, and shows that it is possible to make the world a more just place, starting with the environment where we work.